Hey guys, Scott from Realistic Outdoors here. Well, it's not a long episode, but it's reasonably information filled. There's we're doing the roof today. We're doing the fiberglass, and you're going to see that I failed. There was a huge failure, and it really set me back. I want to talk a little bit about it during the process, and show you how you can avoid actually having the same failure. The fiberglassing part was pretty easy, and it worked. It it would have been waterproof. I just the stage I was going to make afterwards, it wouldn't have worked for what I was doing. So now it's doubly wicked roof because of what I had to do to solve the issue. So stay tuned, follow along on how the fiberglassing works. And by the way, all the fiberglassing that I did, was correct. It worked. It was the proper stages and process. So you can certainly use this information to do what you got to do. But there's a couple key things. Watch for them. I'll point them out as they happen. All right, you guys enjoy the episode of fiberglassing the roof. We'll see you on the other side.
Just doing a test with some wax remover on a piece of the styrofoam. Just to make sure all the wax is off. I want to make sure it's not going to eat the styrofoam. This styrofoam is pretty good styrofoam. Styrofoam pink by Corning. Anyway, doesn't seem to be eating through it, so I think it's safe to clean it up. I'm going to be attaching the fiberglass to the aluminum using an adhesive, but I want just the top done, and then I'll, with a soft piece, trim it up, and then put adhesive on the back, stick the fiberglass, and once that's stuck and dry, I'll put some resin over top of that. Okay, so I'm just going to peel some of the protective plastic off my aluminum siding here. And just as a side note, this polyester resin I've used from MotorMaster is fantastic. I've used it plenty of times before, and it's really nice because you can get small amounts of it, so you don't have to buy tons of it. So just a qualification there, this is fantastic, inexpensive epoxy resin. It's a polyester resin, and I have tested it, and I've used it many times on styrofoam successfully, but we have a little issue here. That stuff is not good for your lungs. We're a properly rated respirator. Okay, as I mentioned, I have used this successfully on styrofoam. But here's where my failures come in. Failure number one. The test I did prior to use this, I laid a piece of fiberglass on top of a piece of styrofoam, and then I covered it in my resin. What I'm doing here is wetting the styrofoam first in this bottom half, and I think you'll find out that this was the mistake. It was too much sauce all at once, and it started to create a heat when it was starting to set off, and once it set off, it started to melt into my styrofoam. But I did it in two stages. I did this half I wet, and then the top half I didn't, and I should have not wet this styrofoam. So, lesson learned. It'll work on top. Poly resin will work on top of styrofoam, but you have to lay the fiberglass on top, and then you have to rub the epoxy into the actual glass, not actually doing what I'm doing here. This was, I don't know why, I had a mental breakdown. I always wet out the product before you lay the fiberglass down so that you get good penetration into the wood. And I use that in air quotes because obviously there's no wood here. And it wasn't necessary to wet this. And that ended up being the biggest downfall of this fiberglassing. And I will show you exactly what it looks like and what happened coming up. So fast forward a little bit, you can see that I've finished putting the epoxy down onto the bottom half, and now I've laid the front half down from the center all the way up and over, and I didn't actually lay down the preset wetting that you would normally use in fiberglassing. I'm just laying it down over top. There is an actual direct correlation to the failure is right at that wet line, and it did turn out fantastic. And hey, don't get me wrong, it hardened, and it hardened really nicely, and it did its fiberglass fun things. However, what I wanted to do to finish this roof was to actually roll over the rubber ceiling material that they use on some campers. So it's just basically a roll-on rubber, and because it ended up not being smooth on a lot of the parts, which I'll show you, I just know that it wouldn't have looked nice, and there was no way I could have come back from that after I put the rubber on top. So it ended up not being the direction I went to finish the camper, to give it the store-bought look that I was looking for, and that's why I wanted to put the rubber on top. But after this fiberglassing piece here, and it hardens for a day, you'll have a quick look and you'll see exactly why I couldn't go any further. As I stated earlier, I wanted to trim off and leave about 1.5 inch overhang, and I didn't want any glass epoxy on it yet. So here I am trimming it before it gets too hard. And what I wanted to do, I have an adhesive made by Lord that I was going to use to attach the fiberglass fabric to the actual aluminum siding itself, making a perfect seal and not allowing any water to come in. But because I didn't get that far because of the changes I had to make, I didn't bother using that adhesive. As the fiberglass starts to set off, you can see on the back panel now that there's actual bumps, and as it continued to harden up, it gained some air bubbles and some big valleys. Paid no attention to the wood. This is from a segment coming up, but it's the only place that I have where you can actually see the massive amount of bubbles on the back there, and then the bubbles that created on the front surface in this video here. And in my anger, I did not get much videoing because after it hardened and it was so bubbly, I was beside myself. I had come so far so quickly, and then I was positive if I put that coating on the roof, it wouldn't turn out as nice as I wanted. So here's where this is some advanced shots of me creating the molding, which I'll show you in detail how I made, and it turned out wicked. But I was going to use cedar to trim it, and because I'm having to change mid-go here and change how I did the roof, that the cedar trim kind of went out the window with it. It was a little unfortunate, and I really didn't get a lot of videoing of the ruined product just because of how upset I was. So I just found these in videos from coming up future pieces that I'll just use for reference so that you can see what I was talking about. So I had ordered aluminum sheet on a roll, but there were so many setbacks that I finally ended up just getting this steel, and it's treated both sides, but you can see the green grass. It took forever to get it, so we were months behind. Here's another quick opportunity to see the bubbling that happened, and if you pushed on it, I mean, it was a good seal, but you can feel the crinkle, and I was just pretty sure that when I put that rolled rubber on top, it would still have that push flex and the crinkle in behind, and I don't think that would have been professional or look amazing. So I've left the fiberglass on, and it's going to be an extra layer of not insulation but protection from the water and moisture, and I put the roofing right over top. After I used some string to go over the trailer from the stem to stern to make sure once I measured it, it was the exact length that I needed, I put the measurements onto the steel, and then I cut the pieces up using my angle grinder and a zip cut disc. It went pretty quick, pretty easy. It's probably one of the simplest parts of this whole project, even after waiting this long. You can see there's like flowers in the background. When I started this, there was snow on the ground, so I definitely was delayed way longer than I wanted it to be. That roof really set me behind, not only emotionally being upset about it, but then ordering the aluminum that never showed up and was mixed up on several occasions. So I was just happy to see the tin and get the tin on. And you won't see the process of what I did here because I was just in a hurry at this point. But I laid down some PL 400 on top of the fiberglass, and I laid in some spray foam after I laid this out to see how it fit. I put a little bit of spray foam just so it would stick and not be so squishy. I left about a 6-inch overlap on the two pieces that had where they met up because it wasn't long enough. And in there I put some butyl tape so it can't leak back on itself. And when I put the screws down into it, I made sure that I coated the screws really nicely so that they won't leak either. And then around on the front, this is another angle here, but so once I have this on there and the trim on, here's a couple bolts that I stuck through into the nuts that I mounted into the wood on the ceiling because I'm going to put my spreader lights up there. And okay, so here's a quick sneak peek of the trim, which I haven't made yet, but you'll see how it's made. But then I put that on there just to see what it looked like.
One really big step closer to finishing. I still have some trim to put down there, but I'm not going to do that today. Well, guys, that's it for this episode. It's short, like I said, just under 12 minutes or whatever, but the failure was a learning lesson. And is it better? Oh yeah, it's way better than what it was going to be. It looks way more professional than it was going to be. I really wanted that rubber layer on top of the fiberglass directly, and I know it would have worked had I actually put the fiberglass on top and then used the fiberglass, the polymer epoxy on top. However, it ended up being a wicked lesson, and I love how it's turned out. It's even better. I hope that you've learned a little something about that. I did do the test, and I do actually still have the piece of styrofoam with the fiberglass on top, and it never melted. So the only part that failed was the actual wetting it out first. So don't wet out styrofoam. Now, the other lesson I learned, and I did a test afterwards, is if you actually spray a clear coat or any of your old spray paints that you have hanging around, doesn't matter what color it is because you're going to cover it over, just spray the styrofoam out and let it dry, and then put your fiberglassing on top, and you can epoxy the heck out of it, and it doesn't damage it at all. So take those away. Very good lesson. And just coat the styrofoam with everything. Give it 24 hours, whatever you do, with a small piece, and test it first. Whatever you do, just test it first, like I did with when I was putting the my wax remover and stuff on top. Worth the test. Anyway, guys, thanks for hanging around. We're getting into the molding now, and the molding was the hardest part, but turned out the absolute best. So stay around for that, because figuring out how to do those bends, and so you don't see all those chop marks and stuff, and nice and smooth and well painted, it is awesome. So anyway, stay tuned for that. That is my favorite part of this whole episode. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Scott from Realistic Outdoors, and I hope your camper is going well. Take care.